institutions, as you know, play such a critical role in our economies and society, and how they drive development and growth for us. And that could be, for example, through credit, through investment, through insurance. But an important role is also absorbing the risks that are related to this growth. Now, we all may be aware of the Sustainable Development Goals, and they encapsulate what are our risks from a social, environmental, and governance perspective when they focus on people, planet, peace, and prosperity. So we have to ask ourselves, with 2030 only 8 years to come, or 8 years away, and that being the deadline for the SDGs, where are we going to get the resourcing and the money to actually finance the development that we need on our continent as Africa? And so it becomes clear that the pool of resourcing also has to be pulled from financial institutions, both locally, across the continent, and internationally, because the fact remains, government and civil society really cannot do this task on their own. So before we begin, a couple of little housekeeping items for you. You will have noted when you joined, you're automatically on video off and audio as well. Please keep it that way so we don't have any distractions or mishaps throughout the event. We do invite you to share your comments, your feedback, your questions on the chat, and we will draw those into the conversations. But for now, if I could please ask you to just post your name, say hello, tell us which organization you're from, which location you're in, and feel free to use however many languages you want to use in sending your message, your preferred language, because for majority of us on this beautiful continent, we have the privilege of speaking more than one language. We'll also run a little poll for you later in the event, where we'd love to capture your feedback on a few insights that will be very helpful to ABPA and its partners in shaping this conversation going forward. So to kick us off, as you send your greetings in the chat, I'd like to welcome the CEO of ABPA, Dr. Frank Aswani, to give us his welcome remarks. Frank, over to you.
Thank you very much, Susan, and welcome everyone. As Susan has mentioned, my name is Frank.
Frank, I think you're on mute. We
Am I on
can't
mute?
hear you.
No, I'm not on mute.
I
can you hear me?
him. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Susan, can you hear me? I presume everyone else can hear me, so I'll go ahead. So, hi, my name is Frank. I'm ABPA CEO. I'm based out of Johannesburg. Really happy to be hosting this panel. We're super excited about what the panel is about to discuss. As you know, ABPA is a network of investors looking to maximize the mobilization and deployment of capital for impact. And financial institutions are a critical part of that supply side capital part. And we are super excited to be having the distinguished guests with us today, because for a long time and will continue to be, banks and financial institutions still remain the biggest source of capital for Africa. So it will be really interesting to see how they're thinking about sustainable finance in terms of supporting ESG initiatives across the continent. We hear very often about Africa not having enough investable opportunities. I always challenge investors as well to say, you're probably also not being as creative with the tools you're using to deploy capital. So today will be interesting to see what creativity and innovation some of these institutions are presenting. We are really, once again, I'd like to thank, and we're really glad to our sponsors and partners, as mentioned by Susan, ABSA, Responsible Business Consulting, and USAID for making this possible. But without further ado, because I do want us to spend more time talking to and listen to our panel, I'll hand over back to Susan. And please do follow us. If you're not subscribed to our newsletter, please make sure that you go to our website and subscribe. And there are many interesting activities we're still going to be doing in the next couple of months and weeks with AVPA. But it's super exciting to be part of this initiative where we're trying to grow the impact movement on the continent. All the best to the panelists, and I wish you all a happy session.
Thank you very much, Frank, for the opening remarks. And thank you to AVPA for hosting this platform and really providing a forum where we can talk about sustainable finance and Africa's development from our context on this continent. Let me give a few shout outs for the people who have posted. Chinwe from Singapore, hello and welcome, great to have you here. Chandru from South Africa, great to see you here. We've also got Marvin from Windhoek, Namibia. Wonderful that you can join us. So yeah, please keep just posting your messages to say hello. Janine from University of Cape Town, I think, Graduate School of Business. Great to have you here with us. Keep on sending your messages. It will be great to know who's here and who's engaging with us. I'd like to now welcome our keynote address, and that is from Alan Nunke, who is the Portfolio Manager, Financial Institutions Group from the International Finance Corporation, or IFC. Alan, if you could please join us. Before his role at IFC, Alan was the IFC Principal Banking Specialist for Africa, and he has over 20 years of corporate banking experience across the continent. Alan, welcome and over to you.
Thank you very much, Susan. And I would like to here express my appreciation to the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance for convening us all at this webinar, the third on the
Alan, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Susan. And thank you to the AVPA to convene us to this third of its kind Sustainable Finance Dialogue, where we would be happy focusing on the urgency of ESG, as in environmental, social, and governance, and sustainable finance for the development in Africa, and looking especially at the financial institutions perspective. And this theme, which we find very appropriate, start with the urgency. And the urgency here is better translated into the fact that it is estimated that up to 132 million people will be pushed to extreme poverty by 2030 by climate change, and this is the global figure. As regards sub-Saharan Africa, we're looking at 39.7 million people that may be pushed by climate change into extreme poverty. This is huge. But then what is to note is that we could bring this number down to half of it if we add together. Hence, as I said earlier, this theme of this webinar is very much suitable, appropriate, and timely. But then it is urgent to address issues of climate finance in this respect. Now, we give you here on this slide, just a more generic perspective of where the challenge, how the challenge depicts itself in terms of the weather patterns, agriculture and food, human health, ecosystems, water resources and quality, as well as vulnerable population. From a weather perspective, again, we're focusing here at what translates into severe flooding and intense drought. From and the impact of that in terms of economic loss and homes destruction. We're looking at agriculture and food here from the dimension of drought, heat stress, and flooding, which affect crops yields overall. Human health issue here is from warmer temperatures and unusual heavy rainfall. Ecosystems, again, is reflected by the migration patterns, geographic range, and seasonal activity of terrestrial and marine species. And water resources and quality from the change in distribution of rainfall, drying up of rivers, melting up of glaciers, amongst others. And on the vulnerable population side, again, and this is again very relevant to Africa, women, children, and elderly, which face grave risks due to susceptibility to infectious diseases, amongst others. So this is just in generic terms how the impact translates across these 6 variables. The next slide. It's important to sort of also differentiate, the dimensions of climate finance on one hand and sustainable finance. And in this regard, it's important to indicate that, specifically climate finance will rather refer to, what is sort of done in terms of financing by local, national, or transnational institutions to seek to support mitigation and adaptation actions that will address climate change. And here, the focus is on one hand on climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation on the other hand, mitigation having to do mostly with how do we reduce global warming and greenhouse gas emissions, whereas adaptation will have to deal with reducing vulnerability to climate change impacts and also reducing human and material losses. On the other hand, sustainable finance is sort of encompassing climate finance on one hand, but also extending itself to a broader ESG agenda. So sustainable finance itself will refer to policies, regulations, and practices by regulators, supervisors, and industry associations, including financial institutions, in view to reduce and manage ESG risks on one hand, but also to encourage the flow of capital to assets, projects, sectors, and businesses that have, ESG benefits, including climate change mitigation and adaptation. So, in a sense, with sustainable finance would be have a broader scope at the ESG wide level, and include climate finance as part of its agenda. Next slide. So as indicated earlier, sustainable finance will have sort of 2 pillars, one to do with risk management and the other focusing on financing products. On the risk management side, it's important to note that integrating ENS risk in lending, underwriting, and financing will be the focus. And this is especially from a financial institution's perspective, having to embed ESG risk within its overall lending activity. And on the financing side, it's really about more directly supporting lending and underwriting on financing to businesses that are engaged in environmentally friendly and socially responsible businesses. These are those that are typically mentioned, whether renewable energy efficiency, green finance products, or other green products such as green buildings and disaster resilience. Next slide. Now, as we're looking at ESG risks, it's important to be a little bit more specific as to what are the generic environmental and social risks that are looking at here. And it's, first of all, ESG risk is sort of forms part of the usual or ordinary regular business risk. and translates into specific credit risks, liability risk, and reputational risk. So an ESG or environmental social specific risk, can translate into credit risk specifically because of, either you have escalation of project costs, which are linked to E&S issues, fine penalties, loss of production capacity, poor efficiency, or increased insurance costs. So this is how, ESG specific risks would translate into credit risk. ESG risk can also translate into liability risks from the angle of, obtaining ownership of contaminated collateral by a financial institution, direct liability in the case of strict lender liability, but also, and this has happened quite often in Africa, class action suits, which makes the financial institution responsible for negative impacts. And on the reputational side, this is also something we've seen across the continent. The E&S risk translating into reputational risk through media coverage, local resistance of consumer campaigns, and no less importantly, governmental investigations. So this is how, ESG specific risks comes to translate itself in a broader risk for the financial institution through credit, liability, and reputational dimensions. Next slide. It's also important to sort of understand ESG impacts, not just in terms of risk, but there's also corresponding opportunities for a financial institution specifically. If you look at the employee dimension, of course, the downside of sort of incurring ESG risks could be strikes, but at the same time, for financial institutions that have an adequate adoption of ESG risk into its operations would benefit from retention and productivity from an employee perspective. So you can see then across the various stakeholders for which, on the one hand, the E&S risk can involve some downside, but also how the upside can be generated. Just picking up a couple of others, if you look at shareholders, for instance, okay, it goes without saying that financial institutions that is good at addressing E&S risks stands to attract more investors. On the other hand, may suffer from long-term divestment of investors if it doesn't do well in that regard. NGO, which is clearly one connecting to reputational risk. Okay, an upside is really about how do you get NGO to cooperate to the financial institutions, without which you will face a campaign from NGOs as a whole. Okay, another one is really about.
Alan, if I could ask you to wrap up, please. So we have a minute left. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move to the next slide. Okay, this is just one example of how the IFC was able to support a country like Nigeria in adopting sustainable banking principles in 2013. And amongst those principles, I would like to mention, like the first principle in terms of supporting, banks now having business activities built around environmental and social risk management. And another principle which I want to highlight here would be about, how the ESG helps banks to improve on ESG governance as a whole. So this is just to give us an example of what we're able to do to support the government in sustainable banking principle. Next. Yeah, this again, some of you may be familiar with this SBFN cross-cutting themes, the 10 cross-cutting themes, amongst which I want to highlight, the urgency to address climate change, the circumstances of COVID-19 that has boosted interest in sustainable finance, and also highlighting the role of governing bodies with regard to climate risk management as a whole. Next slide. Yeah, we thought it's important to also highlight how much effort the financial institutions community has put into supporting, sustainable finance as a whole on the continent specifically. These are some of the landmark examples of what was achieved in recent years by a number of financial institutions on the continent. You would see that there's been quite some huge push into green finance, especially in Southern and Eastern Africa as a whole.
Alan, thank you very much. Maybe we'll stop and pause here because I think it's a great slide that captures examples, real life examples of what some banks are doing across the continent in terms of trying to shift this agenda towards more sustainable finance. For myself, I think a couple of things I picked out is looking at what you were calling out about climate change, but also importantly that it's actually a human development issue, and not just a weather environment issue. Because of the fundamentalness of climate in terms of how we live, growing our crops, our shelter, etc., it will going forward play a significant role in our human development on this continent. And then I think the other thing I just want to mention that struck me is, there is, of course, looking at it from the risk perspective, but also importantly to see it from an opportunity perspective. Absolutely. And just from that side, what we have on our continent and the opportunities, I think, are so significant, perhaps even more compared than any other region on the globe. So thank you so much for your insights on that. I very much appreciate it. Please feel free to continue to stay with us, but you can go off mute and video. I hope you can join us a little later, and I'll just now transition on to the next session. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Susan.
Great. So a couple of more shout outs because I've been checking the chat. Hello, Neil from Standard Chartered in Scotland. Great that you could join us. Nimol from Cambodia. Desmond from Masai Mara University. Anouk from Total Impact Capital. And Thierry, who's in Uganda and wondering if there are any other fellow compatriots or people based in Uganda as well. Please feel free to continue just to say hello to each other on the chat and see who's there and connect with each other as well. For this next session, we're going to be moving into a panel. And here we want to dive a bit deeper into understanding, beyond the banks. We saw an example in Alan's slide when we closed off that session, how banks are looking at ESG from an environmental, social, and governance perspective to shape our development. And I'd like to welcome our distinguished panel, and we will kick off first with Juan Gigidaiga, our Managing Director of Kenya Women's Microfinance Bank, who will introduce us to what it is that his bank is doing in terms of sustainable finance. Wangi, karibu, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Susan. And I'm happy to be here this afternoon, and I wish to thank all of you. So I'll give you a walk through the journey of sustainable financing from KWFT point of view. Let us go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So KWFT is a microfinance bank which focuses purely on women. Women are our core focus. Of course, we tolerate men within the family setup because we do not want to be seen to discriminate against men. So our vision is to be a women financial solution provider, and our mission is to partner with women in creation of wealth. And when we talk about wealth, we are talking about both their wealth, and that is basically the family wealth and the institutional wealth, to make sure that we have a sustainable way of looking at issues. Among our core issues is, of course, we look at financial performance, social and environmental impact, social customer experience, human capital optimization, and we look at areas of partnership. Our target market is women, and but we use the woman as the entry point to the family. And the reason why KWFT was put together, it was started way off in the 80s, is basically to give women a voice and to put women at the center of the way things are done in this world, because those days women were completely excluded and sometimes even isolated. Then we have a customer base of about 800,000 clients. Our employee base is about 2,000. Majority of them are women, about 1,100, men from about 900. And we are owned by a number of shareholders. There is Econet Africa, which was the founding company that formed this bank. And there is customers, our own customers who we finance own 25% of the bank. Employees own 22%, and directors, past and present, own 3%. Then we have two strategic investors who own us 25%. Next slide. What do we stand for, and what do we do, and why do we do what we do all the way from the 80s? First is we look at the triple bottom line. We have a triple bottom line approach. One is we look at people. How do we focus on people from a social point of view? Do we impact them positively or negatively? Then we also look at the planet. How do we impact the planet? How do we impact the environment? Then we now come to issues of financial sustainability. So we look at sustainability from an all-rounder, from a social impact to an environmental approach to a financial approach. And if any of our product does not respond to any of those three, then we do not do it. Next slide. So our corporate governance, we have a board of directors headed by our able chair, Jane White, and we have a board that heavily composes women. There is the only financial institution that men are outnumbered, and the women must be at the top, and the chair of the board must be a woman. And we try to maintain this because we feel very strongly that women need to be given the rightful position, not in service delivery, but also in participating. So at the board level, women from 64% and men from 36%. Next slide. This is the top management. Sorry, you moved to, yeah, this is the top management. We are 10 of us at the top, and women are here. They are there. They are 4. They represent the bank at that point. And here we have a combination of men and women as it were. Next slide. We also partner with a number of institutions that have common thinking like us. We partner with them so that we can be able to have a total rounded approach to the way we do business. So I don't need to go through all of them, but these are part of the partners that we have with us. Next slide. The next slide shows you our branch network. Sorry, you've gone. This is the branch network. You don't need to know what is in the. You need to read the boxes, but each box represents a branch. Kenya is broken in 47 counties. We are in 45 of the 47 counties. So we have branches, about 230 branches spread across the whole country. 80% of our business and our presence is in the rural area. And primarily, majority of Kenyans live in the rural area. Our target market is basically in the rural area, because our main aim is to curb the rural-urban migration, so that when we are talking about sustainability, we are talking about empowering people where they live, not empowering people in towns and then moving them to towns through supporting that process of rural-urban migration. So we curb that by making sure that we have enough branches spread across the whole country. 80% of them are based in the rural area. That's where we basically do business. So we are a rural microfinance institution, though we have a presence in the urban areas. Next slide. We have various delivery channels. We have branches that our clients can be able to visit, but we do not always wait for the customers to come to our branches. So what we do is we go to the villages. We travel every branch. We travel about 50 kilometers radius using motorbikes. We meet women in groups. So our staff use a lot of motorbikes. We have ATMs. We also have a mobile banking platform. About 200,000 of our clients are in the mobile platform. And so we are able to leverage between technology and also moving out to the villages to meet the women at that point. Because once you meet them there in their places, then you are able to engage, you are able to understand their needs, you are able to know where you need to come in, because we do not want to assume that we know what they want, but we go there and they are able to tell us what are their issues and how we need to engage with them. Next slide. So on our services and product, we offer both savings product where the women are able to save and their families, they can save very small amounts of money so that they are able to get a return. We also give them business loans, we give them unsecured financing. We also give education loans for our clients' children, because the main idea is that after you have taken a client, you need to look at their client. So the clients always come and tell us, okay, you gave me a business loan, but my child needs to go to school. Can you finance their education? So we finance their education. And after they are educated, then we also give them chances to come and also be with us for attachment. We also offer them employment. We also offer, yeah.
Sorry, if we can just finish on this slide, because I think you're touching on some really good things that I want to ask you questions about. Once we've brought in the other speakers, then we begin the conversation. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Mwangi. I saw a couple of comments in the chat where people were delighted to see that your bank is actually taking a triple bottom line approach. So let me introduce our other speakers, and then we can begin the conversation and take some questions from the audience as well. So Heidi, if I can welcome you. Heidi is the head of sustainable finance for ABSA based out of South Africa in the corporate and institutional banking division. Heidi, welcome.
Perfect.
Heidi, sorry, we have a problem hearing you.
Now, Susan?
Yes, we can. Now we can. Go ahead.
Okay, brilliant. Hi, brilliant. Sorry about that. I was just introducing myself and saying that it's really wonderful to speak to you today, especially given that it's such a wonderful, diverse group of people from across the continent that have dialed in. So I'll kind of just give a very short and sweet update around what we at ABSA are doing when it comes to sustainability and sustainable finance. So ABSA is a Pan-African regional bank or kind of continental bank that is head officed in South Africa. Our biggest banking footprint is in South Africa, but we have offices in Uganda, Tanzania, Mozambique, Mauritius, Seychelles. We have regional offices in Nigeria, as well as in London and kind of the United States. And really kind of the way we are positioned is as a conduit into finance into and out of Africa, or particularly supporting the African continent. So I sit within the corporate and investment banking division and head up sustainable finance. And I think kind of just giving an overview of where ABSA is in its sustainability journey is really helpful. So at the end of 2019, we signed up to the United Nations Principles of Responsible Banking, which essentially signed us up to kind of align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, as well as with the Paris Climate Change Agreement. From then, kind of very much to what Mr. Alain was speaking about, sustainability and the way it's being embedded at ABSA really much takes this double-sided view. So on the one hand, it's really around how do we manage risks when it comes to sustainability? And the other side of the coin is really how do we create opportunities and enable sustainable and inclusive growth across our continent, which is really critical kind of given where we sit. So on the risk side, there's a lot of work going on kind of increasing our due diligence and understanding sustainability risks more broadly speaking, as these are already becoming more and more emergent. So sustainability is kind of gone from being a risk that was a subtype of kind of reputational risk to its own principal risk, which means that there's a lot of work going on around how we manage sustainability risk differently and more holistically in the future. And on the other hand, I would say in the opportunity side, there's really kind of two things that have happened. On the one hand, there's amazing things that we have done at ABSA for a very long time that we didn't necessarily put under the sustainability umbrella. And there's other things which really says this is how we are moving the dial forward and where we're doing more. So in the first bucket around things that we've done for a very long time, these would be such as funding renewable energy. Our resource and project finance team has played an incredibly pivotal role in funding the IPP project in South Africa or the REAP round project, but also financing other renewable energy such as the Gigidaiga hydro plants in Africa. So there's some initiatives that we've been doing for a long time, and other examples in that would include things like enabling affordable housing or social housing in both in South Africa and across the continent, or things, enabling access to financial services, much to what my Juan was talking about, can also be incredibly impactful. So one of the solutions that we have in the corporate investment bank is supplier financing, and basically what this means is we work with our corporates and we work with them to help them finance their suppliers to help them develop SMMEs in their supply chain, as another example. But then kind of setting up the sustainable finance team, there's also things we're doing differently and we're doing new. And that would be things such as green loans, green bonds, sustainability linked financing, which has come to life and which I'm very heavily involved in. And that really is also speaking to changing the conversation we're having with our clients. And really the stance we've taken at ABSA is to say, we want to help our clients transition. So we really believe that given we're in the African continent, taking both the environmental and the social perspective into account is incredibly critical. Some of the kind of perspectives that can be taken by some of the European banks, we don't have the privilege to take, because we in South Africa, we've got kind of the ESCOM problem, if I can call it that, where you have to take a holistic approach because you can't exit coal tomorrow for a number of reasons. And it has a huge social impact if we stop coal mining, because there's a huge amount of people that rely on that for jobs. And there's just a holistic picture that needs to be taken. So there's a huge amount of effort going on around the question, how do we help our clients transition? And some of that is providing them financial services and financial solutions. And some of that is really around enabling them, to articulate their sustainability strategies, or, helping them partner with other clients across the industry to kind of increase their impact. So there's a lot going on from our side, and I think I'll leave it there so that we can answer some of the additional questions in the Q&A. Thanks, Susan.
Thanks, Heidi. That was really insightful. One thing I really liked is how you said, there were things that you were already doing that you hadn't realized or hadn't, quote, grouped them as, SDG relevant. And I think that can be a story to a lot of institutions across the continent. And like you said, because of, for example, our energy and electricity need, financing solar and, renewable energy is not, may be things that have been done right from the beginning, but were never really considered as ESG per se. So I think our continent has a lot of opportunity to do things in a different way from the beginning. So thanks a lot for that introduction. I did pay attention to what you said about coal. I'm not ignoring it and saying that you're going 100% renewable, just to check that. But I'm going to pause on that one because it's always a little bit of a controversial conversation. So allow me now to welcome our third panelist, who is Kuzai Gumunyu, the Divisional Head of Agribusiness from First City Monument Bank, Nigeria, to share with us some context. Kuzai, please forgive me if I end up cutting you short as well. I just really want to make sure that I have the time with you and our audience to ask a few questions. But go ahead.
Thank you, Susan. If you can go to the next slide. FCMB is a Nigerian Stock Exchange listed bank, and we subscribe to the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles, which states that we will avoid, minimize, or offset the negative impact of our business operations on the environment and local communities in which we operate, and where possible, promote positive impacts. We will respect human rights in our business operations and business activities. Having said that, there are about 3 issues that we really deal with when we are talking of sustainable finance. First and foremost, there are environmental issues. I think these have been seriously dealt with previous speakers. I will not really go into them in a deep way. Social issues as well as governance issues. If you can go to the next slide. So for us, sustainable agriculture, where I really where I'm best, it's we actually are living the sustainable banking practices in financing projects that impact especially smallholder farmers, that actually impact on the environment, that promote sustainable agriculture. And for us, when we are doing our risk assessment, we make sure that we look at each and every project or finance requirements such that it meets the Nigerian sustainable banking practices. I'll give an example of our financing of some of the clients, like the ones that are stated there: plantation industry, Babangona, Sultry. Those are businesses that actually promote smallholder agriculture in such a way that they access finance which ordinarily they would not have been able to access. You find that they will get fertilizer, chemicals in bulk. They also get extension. And at the end of the day, they've got a ready market because the clients whom we finance actually off-take everything that the farmers produce. At the end of the day, you find that the farmers will be able to get higher yields. They will be able to get better prices for their commodities, and post-harvest losses will also be minimized because there's a ready off-take once they harvest. And in terms of access to finance, we find that when the farmers now are able to get a lot more income, we have been able to go into those communities and establish agency banking platforms because now there's an economic activity which is taking place there. We now have our bank going into the communities and embedded in the communities in the form of agents. Financial inclusion impact is therefore realized, and we are living that, and we have seen the impact where farmers are now able to even access other things they would ordinarily not have been able to access. On the same platforms, they are now able to book even mechanization services for them to till the land, because they can do those through the agents. They can cash, they can buy airtime, they even have access to loans for solar power units, because now they have a name, they have a rate, an annual income which they get. So in addition to delivering environmental gains, this adoption is also potential to drive regional poverty alleviation. We have seen that some of the farmers, the average yield in Nigeria for maize is about 1.5 to 2 tons per hectare. But in some of these programs which are financing like Babangona, we're seeing that the average yield is about 4.2 tons per hectare. And they've got a better quality of grain that comes out of them. So they get a better price and better profits, and thereby alleviating poverty. I think we can go to the next slide. So for us, we do internal due diligence, a checklist for borrowers, and we also assess do assessment and management of the risks and impacts on the environmental and social risk. We also have proof of compliance where necessary. We will not disburse a loan where there's no proof of compliance with the environmental and social management risks. We also try and ensure a win-win situation for all, fair pricing and services for products, satisfaction of all parties. And we have seen that happen with smallholder farmers who are actually part of the schemes that we finance. They end up being better placed than if an ordinary farmer was on their own. And we also have preference for finance of agribusinesses as a bank. In particular, we started about 10 years ago at about 0.8% of our book being agribusiness. Today, our book is about 11% agribusiness. And most of the business is also offtake from smallholder farmers, and they also sell to the smallholder farmers. So that preference has enabled us to do a lot in terms of sustainable finance in agriculture. And we also, like our clients who are into the oil palm value chain, we make sure that they are part of the roundtable on sustainable palm oil organization. If they are part of that organization, means they will have to abide by themselves to those principles so that they don't damage the environment, and they actually follow the sustainable principles. So that's what we do. If you can go to the next slide.
Can I just jump in here so I can leave some time for some questions with you? I think you've touched on some really good things, and also just to invite the other panelists to come on screen, because I think from what each of you have shared with us on what your organizations do, there's enough juicy stuff for us to kind of ask and interrogate and learn more together. So Heidi, and also Kudzai, if I could just have you on screen with me, great. So maybe then, Mwangi, I could start with you, perhaps as the first question, and as a way to apologize for cutting you short as the first speaker. So obviously, your bank is 100% tailored to banking on women. But the reality is on this continent, especially, the biggest challenge for women entrepreneurship or any woman going into business is the access to capital. What has been your experience as a bank in banking on women, and what advice would you give another bank in saying these are great people to bank on, i.e. 50% of your country's population?
Thank you very much, Susan. First of all, we have banked women for quite some time. We've been on this business for more than 40 years. And I would say working with women is fantastic because we work at the bottom of the pyramid within the financial sector, because the financial sector is a whole pyramid that you choose the ecosystem you want to operate in. And that is where women are, and they are the majority. and they need our intervention. And the good thing is that women are very good at nurturing business. I think it's the way women are the chemistry works. They're able to nurture businesses from very small level to high level. What we have also experienced is that women know what they want. If they want renewable energy, they will say. If they want you to solve the water issues, it's housing issue. It's very, very clear in their minds what they want. And the diversion of resources is very, very scarce. And in the money we put in for women ends up in the right place and for the right purpose.
Thank you for that. Heidi, if I could come to you, we touched a little bit while you were closing on the climate change conversation, but oftentimes, and I think you mentioned it actually in closing, where you said it's hard for South Africa, for example, to transition or leaving coal behind. On this continent, we can often say climate change is not our priority. We have many other bigger problems to solve for. But your bank, ABSA, has been one of the first banks, for example, to develop a green loan with IFC. What's your view as ABSA and in your role and experience with the perception or the comment that we say climate change is not a priority for us here in Africa? And why was the green loan one of the first things that you did?
Sure, Susan. I mean, I really fundamentally, personally, I don't really agree with the sentiments because I think that climate change, the impacts of climate change is one of the most unjust things that we have, because as much as the people that are least responsible for climate change sit and are housed on the African continent, they will also feel the biggest impact. And it's really unjust in the fact that the people that have the least resources and are least equipped to deal with impacts such as droughts and locust plagues and the things that we have seen, they are the people that are going to face the impact. So I do think that there is an element around, climate change will impact us, and that means we do have to respond. But I do think that in our context, we can't only focus on let's go renewable. It also means that we have to solve for water, we have to solve for affordable housing, we have to solve for schooling. Solving for climate change is really not just a let's do energy problem in our context, in my mind, at all. It is really around holistically saying, how do we adapt to this future? How do we prepare our countries, our continents, our villages, etc., so that we can adapt to this specifically? Just to answer that first part of the question. So I really don't think that we have the luxury of being able to say it's not our problem. I do think, if you look at the global scheme of things, we're a relatively limited emitter, and I think there are countries that are very because they don't have a huge amount of energy that they produce at the moment, so they have the opportunity to leapfrog and to say, we're not going to go this integrated, very high intense infrastructure energy solution, but we're going to do microgrids that connect everybody in a smaller setting, and therefore we can only do renewable immediately, etc., etc. So there is some benefits across the continent that could be actually said, there's a huge energy gap to close, and if that gap is closed in a more renewable way at the outset, that could be very beneficial for many people. And then to come to your question around, we did the green loan with the IFC, and I think that really speaks to we had done a lot of good financing already, and the IFC green loan was essentially supporting that, because we financed these the renewable energy projects in South Africa, and we're a really big financier on that front. And I think that was just one of many things we're doing. But I think it's really a misnomer to just focus on that. I think the affordable, one of the great examples I'd love to really put in this forum is we did a green loan for an affordable housing player. And there it's really amazing because you're both covering the social dimension, because it's affordable housing, which is putting roofs over people's heads, which creates access to, sometimes it's closer to jobs, it's clean water and sanitation. There's many, many benefits that come with affordable housing. But then it's also green, IFC EDGE certified green buildings that, that's why it was a green loan. So that's a really wonderful example of both covering the social as well as the environmental perspective when it comes to sustainability. And as I said before, the IFC green loan had a lot of reporting around it, and it was big in the news. But I do think that there's things that have been actually happening for a long time, just given the fact that we were in the African continent, but we and there wasn't this moment of ESG that we're facing.
Yeah. Thanks, Heidi. We lost you just a little bit at the end, but I think I did capture it. I think one thing, just from hearing what yourself and Mwangi has said already, is that there's already a lot that's happening from a sustainable finance perspective on this continent. It's actually, I think, part of it, you know, platforms like this, or even more, how we can give our examples of how we do sustainable finance from an Africa perspective. Could if I could come to you, and I was very excited to have agribusiness head division here on this, because I think a lot of times, you know, agriculture and how to finance agriculture is seen as such a risky and cagey area. And in one of the panels, in one of the polls from a previous event that we had, our audience actually highlighted food security as the most important area for sustainable finance to go into. From your perspective, because you're in this space, how is it that, you know, sustainable finance into agriculture in our context of Africa? So as you talked about the small scale farmers, etc., what more can be done to scale it? What more can be done to scale it to really secure our food resource for the future?
Thank you, Susan. For me, I think if we do not know where we are coming from, we will never know where we are really going. The major problem in Africa is we've got an elephant in the room, and that's the land tenure system, especially for smallholder farmers. They are not able to use the land that they are on to go and get loans. Their businesses are too small for them to approach the banks on their own, because it's not really profitable for a bank to go and give a loan of, say, $500 or $1,000. It's not really profitable for the banks to do that, because the amount of the amount of monitoring and resources that you put in that small loan is almost the same as you are putting on $100,000 loan. Therefore, we cannot do things the way we have been using to do. We should be innovative, and that's where the outgrower model that has been developed and is working and is expanding and is scalable is actually changing things, especially in Nigeria, where you have an aggregator or a processor who goes and get loans from the bank. They buy fertilizers in bulk, they buy chemicals in bulk, which means they can negotiate for discounts. They also deliver to the farmer's doorstep in bulk, which means transport costs are going to be lower. They provide extension services and probably also do soil analysis for these farmers. At the end of the day, when the farmer now produces, they've got better yields, they've got better quality of the produce. They even have a ready market because the off-taker is now looking to be repaid for the loans that they gave them in inputs. And when they get this, deliver this to the processor or the aggregator, everyone wins. The bank is giving a loan, a big loan to the aggregator, which means it's very cost effective for the bank. The aggregator has a ready supply of produce from the farmers whom they are giving these loans. And at the end of the day, you find that farmers, there's cut off of the middleman because the farmers are selling directly to an aggregator or directly to the processor. The farmer actually gets a better price for their commodity, better yields, better quality, and so they are profitable. Once everyone within the system is profitable, people would want to expand. They would want to do more because it makes economic sense to do that. And thereby, that becomes scalable. As I said, a lot more other services are now being layered onto this, like mechanization, like solar power, to actually to these farmers, because now they have an economic might, or they've got economic power to actually buy some of these things and services. So for me, that is the way we should do it, because these aggregators, they are now using digital platforms to do extension, to communicate with the farmers. They send messages, this is planting time, look at your crops, what to look at, have you received any rains, send us. And it becomes, you know, these days, data is now the new gold. And these guys now have a lot of data on these farmers. They are able to tailor-make their solutions to each and every one of the farmers. The farmers have got access to finance, and production actually is increasing very, very significantly. As I said, the farmers in some of these schemes are getting 38% better prices than if they were going to sell to their own market. They are getting yields that are 2 times what an ordinary farmer would get if they were doing it on their own. And they are getting a ready market. Post-harvest losses are lower than an ordinary farmer who is going to be looking for markets. So that, to me, is the way that Africa needs to do, to go. We need to be innovative and change the narrative. We cannot continue to be doing things the way we were doing before. Otherwise, we'll still get our results that are not so good. Thank you.
Thanks. There's always that expression. We cannot solve for problems or find solutions, but we cannot solve for solutions by using the same thinking that created the problem. So there you highlight and really call out the importance of innovation for our own context. Mwangi, I have a question for you. I smile a little bit because I'm going to be bold in a virtual environment to ask this from a distance. Now, executive remuneration and reward doesn't often take sustainable value creation into consideration. So there's often not an incentive per se for bosses or leaders to take decisions in financial institutions where they ensure the long-term sustainable impact of the investment or the lending that they're doing. What do you think it would take to change that yourself as the managing director, and at that level that we're talking about? What would it take to change this so that ESG consideration is reflected in short-term value to ensure that we get to that long-term value that we need in the future? You're on mute, if you could please. Thanks.
Thank you very much. The advantage I have is I work for an institution that focuses primarily on impact on our clients, both at the social and financial part. So when my board measures me on my performance, they look at how do you impact your clients socially and how do you impact them financially. So it's very clear. At my appraisal level, that is what I'm appraised for. If you look at our strategy as a company, our strategy is very, very clear that social impact and putting the customer at the middle of the business is important. So we do not only talk about financial return for the company, but then how are we impacting our environment? How are we impacting our clients? Are we making them better than we found them? So we work with low income, low economically active women, and my job is to move them from one level of development to the next level so that they can be able to have a good life, be able to improve their families. So we deal with all those products, and that's why we have multiple products, including agriculture, renewable energy, water and sanitation, and housing. And when we talk about housing, we are talking about home improvement at the village level, where that return actually is a problem. We give small loans that change the lives of the women and their families. So when the board talks to me, we do not talk about profits first, we talk about how are we impacting our clients socially? Our investors are also social investors, but they also expect a financial return, but it must be done in a sustainable way. In fact, in 2019, we were voted among the top institutions on the sustainable financing, where we came number 3 within the banking sector, and we were also top at the gender level in terms of sustainable finance. So the issue of sustainable financing is in our genetics. We do not try, we do it. It's our way of life. And we don't do it because we need to do it, but that is the way our business is organized.
Okay. Maybe I'll come back to you in a minute or two to ask, what would you suggest to other bank leaders in a way that they can build that remuneration? But I'll let you think about it, and maybe I'll come next to Heidi with a question before I come back to you, Mwangi. Thank you.
Sorry, I have lost you a little bit, but anyway, I hope.
I'll ask you the question again. Let me, Heidi, if I could ask you, so in one of our events, the participants voted that, when looking at the ESG considerations, the G, the governance part, was the biggest challenge for them, for us across Africa in terms of integrating ESG or, sustainable finance. You're a Pan-African bank working in a very dynamic, diverse continent, which does not have a reputation of strong governance. How do you ensure that governance robustness in a way that makes you comfortable to finance SMEs, large multinationals, small, businesses across the board, local corporations? How do you secure that? How is it not a panic or big challenge for you?
Thanks, Susan. I think a lot of it lies within our processes, due diligence.
Sorry, Heidi, you're breaking up.
Okay, 1 second. No, not.
Please try again.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. My technology is not playing around today. Thanks, Susan. I was going to say, I was saying that it lies in the processes and the systems that we follow when we onboard our clients. So the KYC and the due diligence that we do at the outset is really important, especially kind of in the investment bank. It's really around, we really do have checks that just check, is there controversial issues related to a name? Is this a politically exposed person? These are the types of things that we do and kind of check within our BAU operations. And kind of when there's transactions where we're really concerned, it kind of goes all the way to a review where a transaction is reviewed or a client is reviewed if there's really concerns. And the other side of it, I think the part maybe that, so on the private sector side, it's sometimes a little bit easier because the governance is cleaner. I think the private sector can be quite challenging. And there, to whatever degree we can, we also try and have those difficult conversations with clients. And I was in a meeting this week where we had a conversation with the client and we said, your board needs more people. And the client agreed. And so it's not only necessarily doing the due diligence, it's sometimes also around having conversations with clients on how they can be better.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I'll come to you. It's often said that clients can find ESG difficult to adhere to or to build into processes, especially when it comes to the lending, that clients can find it difficult. How can banks shift their clients' mindset to bring home the urgency of ESG to secure the financing that they're asking for or the lending that they're asking for? So how did you do it, for example, with your loans and support to agribusiness?
So for us, when we are engaging our clients, we actually, when we are talking to them, we are prospecting for business, we are discussing about their plans. We have a template where you have to ask the clients about environmental and social issues and governance issues in the company, whether they meet to the specs that are required by the bank. And we also tell them that unless they get the compliant to those parameters, they will not be able to get a loan. Alternatively, they can get an approval, but before disbursement, we have to be sure that they have corrected those issues that would have seen they are wanting in their business. And when we are also monitoring and we see there are issues that of compliance, we raise red flags with them and we actually write to them to correct. And we expect them to correct within a specified time period. And we also go back to find out whether they are actually complying. So that's what we do with most of our clients. And they know well before they access the loan that there are environmental and social issues which they have to adhere to if they are ever going to get a loan from us.
Okay, great. Mwangi, maybe I'll come back now with my part B, I guess, of the first question I asked you. So obviously for yourself, you said, it's in your performance requirement, having that social impact measurement. That's part of what is your performance measure. What pointer or suggestion could you give to other leaders in banks, not in, of course, your bank, because you've already built it in, but what should they take in mind? What is a pointer you can give them to say, this is how you can build it in for yourselves as leaders in your bank to really hit home on the ESG, being critical to performance for your future?
Sorry, I have lost you, but I think the question you are asking me, I think my internet is giving me a problem, is that what can I tell to other people in my position that this sustainable financing is good business? What I would say is this: every institution must be a good corporate citizen. That is step number one. And for you to be a good corporate citizen, you can achieve it by doing corporate social responsibility. That is, you destroy the environment, you exploit the people, then you become in terms of corporate social responsibility. What you need to do is within your product and services, inbuild social responsibility. It costs money, it gives you a low return on your investment, but it is long-term and sustainable. And that's the way we look at it as an institution.
I think we might have lost Mwangi because his screen is freezing.
Sorry.
Are you back?
I have gotten lost there.
Yes, but you're back now. Welcome.
Yes, so what happens is that every institution within a strategy, it needs to imbue, and not only, I think my challenge is the regulator, and the good thing is that our central bank is looking at sustainable financing as a key measurable for financial institutions. And I think we need to put this thing into regulation, because people will never do things willingly when they cost them money and they give them a little bit low return from what they get on an average deal. So I would say regulation would be the way to go. The other one is people should also input it in their strategy so that we are able to, I have gotten lost again, is it? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
So what I was saying is that we need to inbuild sustainable financing into our strategy. That is, to me, the core of the issue. And it needs to be a measure at the board level. If the institutions that are also participating in the capital market authority, that also should be a measure on how are you performing at the sustainability level, both at environmental and socially, at the institution, at the population level. That to me is where the gist of the matter is. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I want to give you a 1 minute breather, but please stay with us. While I ask our audience, please to take a minute to respond to a poll which we're going to pull up now for you. We thought we'd just take a little pause so our speakers can catch their breath, have a quick refreshment, and have you, our audience, give us your feedback. The poll will be coming up in a minute. It's three, if I'm not mistaken, 3 quick questions where we'd really love to get your feedback. There we go. If you could just respond to these questions for us, and then we will continue the conversation with our panelists. Marvin, you've posted a really great question, and I'll be asking that to our panelists shortly as soon as we're done running the poll. So there's more questions, so just use the scroll on the side of the poll screen to go down to the preceding question number 2 and question number 3. We'll just give it 30 seconds or so. Please do respond to our poll. It will be really, really helpful to get your feedback. The questions are there to really help AVPA and its partners start thinking through the next steps on sustainable finance, and also just give us a sense as an audience of where we think the shift needs to start happening from a sustainable finance perspective. Okay, guys, thank you. Hopefully the poll will still be there, but I do want to invite our speakers back quickly. I know we are starting to run out of time, and I just want to grasp a couple of more responses from you. Heidi, I know you've mentioned that you may have to drop off soon for another commitment. So let me start with you on this one, and I'm going to shift it a little bit, perhaps to be a bit reflective. And so when we look at our context as the African continent, yeah, and all our beautiful 54 plus countries, South Africa is seen as the leader in sustainable finance. But I want to ask you, from your perspective, do Africans themselves invest in sustainable and responsible investments for Africa? And why is this, whatever your thought may be on it?
Thanks, Susan. That's a really interesting, reflective question. Yeah, it's a brilliant question. I think I've had a lot of chats with our head of consumer sector around this, around kind of this, and maybe a drive and shift towards, you know, kind of localization and supporting homemade or locally made in whatever jurisdiction one is in. But kind of if one thinks about it from a more investment perspective, I think it's quite challenging on the African continent to be in a position to just start saving and have investments. You're already part of the very narrow percentage that is quite wealthy. And that percentage in the African continent is quite limited compared to the rest of the world or developed countries. So to be in that portion of people that are thinking about investing or have savings to invest is one privilege. And then to be in the secondary portion of that population that is caring about the planet and wants to make it a better, that decreases that percentage quite significantly. The way I think in kind of the developed North, there's this very big push from the new generation around what is sustainable investing, where's my money going, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure that we have that same volume of people that can do the same, which has an impact on the fact that those products are not coming to life necessarily. So I do think some of the solutions is around kind of like the opposite of microfinancing, it's micro-saving, and micro-saving to make the world a better place on the African continent. And possibly that's what we need to solve, and kind of really to understand this thing of like where you put your money has an impact on your people, on your community, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure that link is always particularly well communicated. So maybe some of it's education, but some of it is opportunity that, as I said, the opposite of microfinancing, it's micro-saving purpose. Yeah. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Susan, thank you so much for the opportunity. I have to drop off.
Thank you.
So I just want to say thank you, and it was really lovely to join. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Heidi. And yeah, thank you for being here with us. Please feel free to drop off. I know you need to rush. But I really like the point that Heidi made about that opportunity for banks on the continent to start making investments or micro-saving opportunities for us to reinvest and support our own continent. Mwangi, if I can come to you a little bit again with a reflective question. And this, I think, I may phrase it a little bit differently, but I think it also covers the question that Marvin was asking in the chat. And obviously, when we talk about Africa and our continent's development, we can't do that without talking about SMEs. They're 90% of Africa's business, 40% of our continent's GDP, and they employ 2/3 of our formal workforce on this continent. What do you think financial institutions should be doing to scale up or do more for SMEs?
Thank you very much. I think what institutions need to do is basically what we do. And what we do is we identify where the people are and where the need is greatest. If you look at our country, Kenya, you will find that majority of our people are out there in the villages, they are there in the rural areas. You need to come up with products with them, not for them, with them, that address their needs. And then you need to reconcile your thoughts and their thoughts, their dreams, and what you want to do, and come up with the solutions for the issues that they have. And I think as Africa, I would say we are very blessed because we have natural resources, and the natural resources we have are able to address the needs of our people. So majority of our people, because they live in the rural area, the first thing we need to cap is we cap the rural urban migration, because if we don't cap the rural urban migration, you end up with big slum areas, people who are unstable, people who have children they cannot be able to take to school. But if you can take development to where the people are, you are able to address their needs. At the same time, you are able to understand what they want. All the products we do as an institution, may it be water and sanitation, renewable energy, agriculture, we have actually understood the needs from the women. So what we do is we now become the middlemen between the opportunities and the needs. And because this bank is also owned 50% by the women clients that we have, they are able to spearhead and shape the direction the bank goes. So I think it's an African solution for an African problem is the way to go about it.
Thanks. I also like the last part of maybe considering your real customer as your board members or your shareholders to the bank, because then by default, from a strategic perspective, you're inevitably solving for them. But I think you're right. Recognizing the scale of SMEs and recognizing the reality of our populations from an income level and solving for products and services that suit them versus what banks may think is needed for them. That connection, I think, is really, really key. Kudzai, definitely our last thoughts with you before we try and wrap up the event. I'm already a couple of minutes over time. But from your perspective, in the next decade, we know when we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and in your presentation, you referenced them, you talked about the Nigeria Sustainable Finance Initiative. So I think you're well versed with the SDGs and the urgency over the next 8 years for us to try and achieve them. Yeah, especially when we look at our context for Africa. But in your perspective, as a financial institution or the financial services sector as a whole, given the urgency of things that need to change in the next decade, what should financial institutions be prioritizing?
Thank you, Susan. For me, what financial institutions need to prioritize, especially in Africa, is investing in platforms that are able to reach the underprivileged or that are able to be innovative to meet the needs of SMEs and micro enterprises that are springing up. There are lots of opportunities which our people in Africa can exploit, but access to finance is a problem, let alone sustainable finance. So we need to make sure we invest, especially in digital platforms that enable our farmers to borrow and repay, and also enable the banks to reduce their risks in financing SMEs, particularly in the smallholder agriculture, because that's where the greatest impact is going to be, because that's where we have most of the unbanked, most of the poor live there. There are infrastructure deficits that are there. But I believe each and every individual smallholder farmer or SMEs out there is a business person. The moment they see that whatever they do is profitable, they will be able to expand. And they will be able to do more, they will be able to employ more people. So there is need to unlock financing, some of it may be using risk-sharing arrangements to unlock credit where banks would ordinarily not have given money, but because there is risk-sharing arrangements, they are able to give out funds to these farmers and SMEs. So there is need to be innovative in order to reach these farmers. I've seen USSD platforms, apps that are enabling. For us, we have got a USSD platform where anyone with a Nigerian number can dial *329# and they are able to open an account immediately, because and their phone number becomes their account number. Thereby, anyone who wants financial inclusion can get that. So for us, we need to be looking at those opportunities that enable the unbanked to be banked, those that have no access to finance to have access to finance, and businesses that make sense and are able to be scalable, like those that are in the outgrower model. I'll give you an example. We're financing a company called Babangona. We started with them with 100 farmers about 6 or 7 years ago. Today, they are impacting more than 300 farmers, 300,000 farmers, which is a major, major, major leap. And we are seeing people's lives changing. So if such business models are scaled up, I think the impact will be massive, will be quick, and it will be very effective. So that will be my advice to financial institutions.
Thank you. Mwangi, maybe I can ask you the same question, just as a parting reflection before I hand over to Nancy to close off for us. From your perspective, over the next decade, if we're going to achieve, proper development, responsible, sustainable development on this continent, what should financial institutions prioritize? I've also asked the same question to our audience. If you're bold enough, please feel free, audience, to type in your thoughts on that question. But Mwangi, if I can let you close off for us with your perspective on that.
Thank you, Susan. I think what we need to do is to mainstream sustainable financing. Mainstream it in our reporting, and our regulator needs to come much more strongly in terms of saying, give us your report. Within your financial report, when you are declaring your profit, when you are saying how much you have achieved, tell us about sustainable financing. How much have you participated in it? Because we can't lack a society by having super profits, and at the same time, the people we serve are getting worse than we found them. I think we need to mainstream a sustainable financing, and I think our central bank has done very well, and our present governor has been spearheading sustainable financing initiative. It needs to be mainstreamed. At the same time, it also needs to be brought as part of how you judge whether you are investing in a company or not. I think that's the solution. If we wait for good things to happen, I would say our clients know what to do. They know where to come in. But the people who do not give them an opportunity are the financial institutions, because we are always going for super profits. We do not care about what happens to the environment. And that's what we need to do. Mainstream it, make it part of the reporting, and then have it put in regulation. That's the way to go about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mwangi. I don't know if both...
By the way, Susan, there's somebody who has asked whether I can share, you can share my presentation with them. Please feel free to share with the participants.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I think our audience is a little shy, except Karaoke. Thank you for posting your feedback. And Marvin, thank you very much for your feedback as well. But guys, feel free to put your answers in there. We can leave them for prosperity and get us thinking about what actually needs to be done, because it's an important question if we're going to shift the agenda. Nancy, you're here with us now. Thank you. I will hand over to you. Nancy is the Executive Director of ABPA for East Africa, and she will be giving us the closing and also the next steps and way forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. Wow, what a wonderful discussion we've had today. I think it could have easily gone on and on and on, but we didn't have enough time. So I just want to, mine is very short. I hope everybody also enjoyed it as much as I did. I think we can all agree the financial sector holds enormous power in funding and bringing awareness to issues of sustainability, whether by launching innovative green bond financial instruments, as Heidi talked about, or supporting agribusinesses that follow fair and sustainable practices, or focusing on women who are make up more than half our population across Africa. So, but remember, creating a more sustainable future requires all hands on deck. And this is something that I think I'd really like to stress today. Investing in business and projects with sustainable ESG practices is on the rise, and is as is the demand for professionals with expertise in this rapidly growing field. This is an area that ABPA is committed to trying to expand through sustainable financing capacity building programs. So please stay tuned. We will be rolling out more programs that focus on innovative financing approaches, which also include sustainable financing. Before we go, I noticed that there are one or two questions in the chat that we were not able to answer today because of timing. So we'll try to reach out to the various speakers and get answers for you. And we'll be distributing a report. We've had actually 3 webinars on sustainable financing in the past few months. So we're putting together a small white paper that we will circulate to all those who attended our sessions, and we'll also share the videos. So in that package, hopefully we'll be able to also answer some of the questions that were not answered during today's session. But thank you so much for being with us today. We had a good crowd. I think at one point we had 92 people on the call today. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our audience members for being with us, for logging on, our keynote speaker, Alan, who had to leave us a little bit early, and also our panelists who were just wonderful. Heidi also had to leave a little bit early, but thank you very much to everybody. And Susan, a wonderful moderator. Thank you so much, Susan. What an invigorating session we've had. Thank you and goodbye to all. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you, everyone, our speakers. Thank you very, very, very much. We wish you all a wonderful end of day or continuation of your day. Farewell.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.